Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Veil, where we delve into realms of high strangeness and exploring phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. Today, we embark on a journey into the depths of the paranormal with renowned researcher and author Christopher Noel. His latest book, UAPs the Afterlife, delves into the enigmatic realm where UFOs and the afterlife intersect. Join us as we explore Noel's groundbreaking research and its intriguing connection to the world of UFO phenomena, consciousness, and the afterlife as we go behind the veil with Christopher Noel. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, great, Mike. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. I've been a big fan of your work for many years, in particular, a lot of your Bigfoot research, which was a rabbit hole all on its own, but that's a conversation for another day. We want to focus on your work with UAPs and the afterlife, which seems to be, that conversation was pretty taboo years ago, but you had people like John Mack, Jacques Vallée, and Whitley Strieber, who are all people and researchers that have connected UFOs or UAPs to the afterlife. There's some type of spiritual connection to it. And then even today, you have the Chris Bledsoe saga, which his encounter, he believes that it was angelic in nature or connected to the spirit realm in that way. But let's just get started. What originally sparked your interest in exploring a connection between UFOs and the afterlife? Was there a specific experience or event that made you pursue this line of research?
Well, thanks for the question, and thank you again for having me on. I appreciate it. It's a two-pronged answer, I guess. On the UAP aspect of the question, as you said, I've been researching Sasquatch for about 18 years. Seriously, I've always been interested ever since seeing the Patterson film at age 11, and researched it and did field work and slept out by myself alone and formulated thoughts about how to understand the nature of this species, this fellow human species, I believe. And the more I did, the more, like most researchers who sincerely look into this, the more the paranormal aspects of the case came into view. And the more people I talked to, the more witnesses I became connected to, and in some cases friends with, the more I'd hear stories of them up and disappearing in broad daylight. It's not as though it's just camouflage and it seems like they're disappearing. No, they'd be walking in the middle of a road in 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they'd be gone. And it's not that it was some trick of the vision, because my friend who saw this was driving a car, and it wasn't some missing time. She continuously drove. It was a continuous experience. There was no break, and yet the individual just disappeared. And she had a friend in the car who saw the very same thing. Anyway, the more I learned about the paranormal aspects of the Sasquatch species, and got to know Mike Patterson too up in Ontario, and became convinced that his phenomena are genuine, even though he can be controversial. The more I realized that there's, yes, a psychic spiritual dimension to this species, and that somehow Sasquatch is more adept than we are at that, in that realm, or in that lane. They stay in their lane. They're more psychic than we are. And I wrote a book called Mind Speak, about telepathy between our species and their species, and how they seem to be more proficient at implanting thoughts and images in our head than we can with each other. So then I wanted to expand. After 18 years, I wanted to expand my Sasquatch research to become more inclusive, so that I could understand them better and understand reality better. Because, our ordinary world is like one reality frame, but most people know that there's a larger reality frame outside of that. Ever since the Babylonians had all sorts of experiences with ghosts that are in this book called The First Ghosts by Irving Finkel. Ever since then, and probably before then, our civilizations have been experiencing this larger reality frame. So I'm thinking, okay, well, Sasquatch is part of that larger frame. Also, their disappearing acts and their telepathy is in the psychic phenomenon, or phenomena plural part of that. And so I connected that, and here's the second prong of the answer, with the childhood experience I had talking to a ghost. When I was 17, a friend of mine who was 14 years older, living up the hill in a little house in the woods, was having some strange experiences in her house, in that house. And she said that when she was asleep at night, her husband would sometimes see a little piece of light, a little light come down from the ceiling and hover over her head, and just hover there and then fade away or go away. And additionally, she and her husband and their friends would often see in the corner of that same room, which was the old part of the house, a pillar of light, a sort of vague, nebulous pillar of light that didn't look like anything much while you were looking at it. But then later, in your mind, all the people compared notes and said they all saw the same thing, which was this image of a old, sad-looking, stooped-over kind of farmer figure with overalls on. And so she was telling me this, and I'm 17 years old, and I said, let's try to contact that ghost. And luckily, she was game for that. So we got a Ouija board, and we went about it. And as often happens, it's very inconclusive and clunky and sort of uninspiring in the beginning. And then for us, all of a sudden, it locked in, and the thing was zooming around the board. We could hardly keep up with it.
Wow.
And so lots of stuff happened with that. I could go on for half an hour just on that story. But what happened that was most outside of the reality frame, and the larger frame, was there would be a bell sound outside the house, like under the eaves outside, and that's when we knew he was here, ready to communicate with us, because we would sit there lots of times and nothing would happen, and all of a sudden we'd hear this bell, and then the planchette would start moving around. Yet in our reality, there was no bell out there.
Mm-hmm.
We even captured the sound of that bell on the cassette recorder that we used, because the planchette was moving so fast that we couldn't transcribe everything. So we would just say the letters into the tape recorder and transcribe it all later. So that happened. Sometimes the room would get really cold, like this piercing cold, like it would go into your bones of your hand. I remember that. And he would say, like, I can't talk today. X is here, just spelled X. And then one time I was about to go on a family vacation. It was summertime, and I said, I told him, well, I'm going to be going for 2 weeks. Goodbye, John. It was his name. And when I stood up to leave, I felt I'd say a hand, but I just felt a caress at the back of my head. I assume it was a hand, but it was a caress in my hair at the back of my head, sort of like half as dense as a ordinary hand, and half, but only half that dense. It was like,
Right.
definitely there, but a little bit incorporeal. So those are absolutely physical things. In addition to all the messages, we filled up a blank book with like 500 questions and answers that we had over many sessions, over months that year. He was stuck on this earth plane because he had killed his daughter. Because then we would press him on this issue. And the spelling would often get really garbled when we would push him on this. But one time he said, she would not love me enough. And he said he had killed her and buried her down at the back of the yard under this elm tree that we could still see, even though he said this happened in 1870. You can never really go to the bank on these dates they give you.
Right.
But he said he wanted us to somehow allow him to move on, because he said when he first died, I said, what was it like when you died? He said it was white, so white I was afraid. Then he said, dove toward sea of blue wonder. And he said, and then he was held in massive hands and made to feel I should die again. And I later went on to college and read St. Augustine, where he talks about the second death, where if you die physically, and then if you're sinful, you die again to the chance of going to heaven. So it kind of was parallel to that. And he wanted us to somehow like help him redeem himself. But it was a screwy thing. He said, you must go. He wanted us to dig up his daughter. And he was like poetic. And one time he said, go, one time, he was both very straightforward and non-poetic. He said, dig dead kid for me. And then,
Whoa.
and then he would be poetic and say, you must gather your harvest of bones.
Wow.
And so anyway, and then he also said, at one point, we said, well, how can we help you? And he said, he called my friend Kate. Her name was
Yeah.
Catherine, but he always called her Kate. He said, Kate and Chris must love each other. Bear her again.
Yeah.
Just like we should have a baby to replace the baby that he had killed. Anyway, the gist of it is that this experience as a young man gave me a foundation of, or an appreciation for the largeness of the true reality, whereas most people either they come onto that later or they never understand that there's a larger reality going on.
Yeah.
So this coalesced then with my study of Sasquatch and my realization that they were part of a larger reality frame at the same time as being part of this reality frame. You know, they have kids, they go to the bathroom, they leave hair samples that, you know, they can be shot and killed. And genetic material can be sequenced from them, even though those studies usually end up inconclusive, very frustratingly. But so they're part of both realms. And, you know, a lot of Native American lore has it that they're spiritual beings. They're not flesh and blood. I see it as that they're flesh and blood, but not spiritual, not just flesh and blood, but something in between. But instead of, a lot of people think that they, as a flesh and blood body, can disappear. I think it's that when they die, like us, they can re-manifest here on this plane, like we can. Some of us can, as spirit, come back and be seen by our loved ones. But I think that, again, just like with telepathy, Sasquatch is more proficient at coming back than we are. So that when they appear and disappear, I think that's the dead ones who are able to still hang out with their kin and companion here on Earth. That's just my pet theory.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book last year called There Is No Veil, talking about the oneness of the larger and the smaller world. It's all one world. And that the difference is that there's not another dimension. There's just different vibrational phases up and down, different frequencies. So that to think of another dimension or to call ghosts or Sasquatch interdimensional is kind of to suffer under a sort of a fixed idea of otherness or awayness or some barrier that you can't, that's objective. But I think that there is no veil. There is no, I mean, I know your show is called Beyond the Veil, but in my little worldview, there's no veil. There's just, because when a ghost, say, manifests, it'll transition smoothly from not there to there. I think that's because it's modulating its frequency. I don't think it's breaking through any objective barrier. I mean, we've all heard stories of people who've been able to see the dead from childhood. I have a friend who, as a young girl, would say, "Mom, who's that guy over there?" And of course, her mom didn't see it. It was some dead uncle, you know. And so there is no. I think that the veil or the barrier is not objective. I think it's subjective. I think it's a state of mind, a mirage that we kind of impose upon ourselves, or is imposed on us by our lack of awareness or sensitivity to the different vibrational levels, different frequencies. And I'd like to read a short. I know it's sometimes annoying when people read quotes, but
No, go ahead.
Okay. This is by Alan Watts, who's a British philosopher.
I love Alan Watts, so you're more than welcome to read Alan Watts. We could read
Very
Alan
short.
Watts.
You may have heard this. Okay, maybe I will. Imagine going through a gate in a wall. Here is this great barrier. You walk through it, you turn around, and the wall and the gate have both disappeared, and you see you were always here. Another end quote. Another way to think of it is that we're as much spirit now as we ever will be, even in the afterlife. So in a sense, we're in the afterlife now, in
Yeah.
that we're the same spirit as we'll be there. It's just that now we're undertaking this dense drama of the life on Earth. Um, so I forget what I was going to say after that.
Well, your book UAPs in the Afterlife. I mean, obviously you've made this connection along with other people. I mean, you're not alone in this field. But let's talk about, what do you think UFOs or UAPs actually are and what do they represent? And how is it connected to the afterlife?
Well, that's the big question. That's the whole book. But so then I moved on for this current book to try to because when David Grush gave his testimony in June 26th, I suddenly realized, well, this is going to become the next big thing,
Yeah.
and I may have some perspective to contribute to this conversation, even though I have no track record as a UFO or UAP researcher. So I'm kind of just stumbling into this field off the street. So
Well, I think you're off to a great start. So
well, it's
that's my humble opinion.
nice of you to say. I'm just trying to do my best to just to add some other perspective. Because, for example, well, okay, I've got a lot to say, so you'll indulge me. But I when I had that ghost experience in 1978, so now I'm dating myself.
That's okay.
Someone's got to date me. Boom, boom. All right. Then I didn't really have anything that spooky happen until just last June. Oddly, the same month that David Grush gave his testimony, or was that July? I forget.
I can't remember. I think it was July.
July 26th. I drove 9 hours each way to Western New York to the Lilydale Spiritualist Assembly, which is this adorable little village of small houses that for some part of the year psychics live in, and they have people come from all over and get readings. And these psychics are pre-screened to be only genuine psychics. No charlatans allowed. So so I went there and I experienced 2 seances. And in these seances, all sorts of amazing stuff happened, like object levitation. I shit you not. And voices from thin air and objects appearing out of nowhere. I was given this little stone, which I haven't polished it. It may be a crystal or a gem. It just looks like a rough little stone.
Mm-hmm.
I was given this by a spirit hand, a hand that just was a hand and nothing else.
You're saying this stone just showed up in your hand.
It was given to me by a spirit hand who gave me the stone, and the spirit hand was just a hand.
Wow.
But it felt as solid as any hand. And many people down through history, which now I've read a lot of history of spiritualism and seances in the middle of the 1800s all the way to today. People have spirit hands touch them. It's quite, I mean, if you'll permit me, it's common within the context of genuine seances led by physical mediums. There's physical mediums where physical stuff happens, phenomena occur during the session, and there's mental mediums that but it's a lot, get information about your loved ones and can pass on private things that only you know, or sometimes information that you don't even know, but then when you go check it out, it turns out to be true, and only this dead person would have known it. But within physical mediumship, there's all this stuff that happens, like objects levitating, objects glowing, objects appearing out of nowhere, disappearing into apparently nowhere. And I realized that it's kind of a microcosm of a lot of what people experience with UAPs. You see UAPs materializing apparently out of nowhere, little gray guys appearing in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And they are sometimes floating in the air. They'll take you by the arm and you float. So you become like the objects inside of a seance, levitation. Gravity suddenly doesn't matter anymore. And so I thought, as I listened to the larger UFO research community's conversation, I realized that people were talking a lot about technology, like what's the propulsion system? How do they manage to, defeat gravity? What's their anti-gravity technology? And I
Hmm.
kept thinking, well, we don't ask that when it's a little gray. Uh, contact, when contactees or abductees report that the grays are just floating, and that they themselves floated, and not just that, but they floated through the wall.
Hmm.
Somehow their density level became lesser than our normal, incarnation density level, that they then could move through solid objects.
Yeah.
And that also happens in seances. Things, matter moves through matter. Um, you know, I didn't experience this, but there are lots of stories of sometimes you can have a little light in a seance room, sometimes it's dark because the subtle energies involved in spiritual phenomena clash with artificial light. But sometimes the the uh, the happenings in with a certain medium are tried and true over years, so that they can begin to be done in light. And this famous medium in England named Stuart Alexander, he can his guests see that he has like these strong zip ties around his wrists on the chair that he sits in, and he can, you know, when when the conditions are right, spiritually, vibrationally, he can move his hand up, and the thing is still intact on the chair, and then you can move it down and like really hard, and it goes around him. And it's not just some magician's trick, because um, this is a guy, Stuart Alexander, who's been vetted for 40 years, and
Yeah. I've heard
Leslie,
of him.
there you go, good.
Yeah, and I've heard of her. Yeah, I've heard of this experience through Leslie Kean's reportings, which is absolutely fascinating. I remember like they talked about the hand that just
Yeah,
manifested, like it was some kind of like plasma, or no, they think she called it. It was actually like ectoplasma, I guess what
well,
they call it.
ectoplasm is a thing, is an
Yeah.
absolute thing, but it's an easy target for critics and cynics to say,
Mhm.
oh yeah, sure. But it's been happening since the beginning of seances in the 1850s.
Yeah.
That some physical mediums are able to produce this substance out of their body that is initially amorphous, and then they can form into hands, faces, this and that, and can do all manner of things. I mean,
Yeah.
if people are interested, I can give you some books to read. I can mention at some point books to read about the spiritualist movement, most prominently Arthur Conan Doyle's History of Spiritualism, for anyone. But so matter is malleable within the context of authentic seances, and matter is malleable in abductions and all sorts of experiences, encounters with UAPs. And so I got to thinking, there's huge overlaps here, and the people who are straining to understand the technology of flying saucers and things that never seem to mention that it may be consciousness rather than technology that allows for these behaviors, these
Yeah.
aerial behaviors that seem
To operate.
to defy gravity. Because when you see a gray floating, and people hear about that, and increasingly over the decades since John Mack began to make it, began to erode the taboo about talking about it.
Yeah.
People are
I'm reading his book right now, by the way, Abductions. I'm a little late to the game on that one, and
such a
it's
thick,
such
thick
a
book.
game changer of a
Yeah,
book if you were to take that literally and hear the accounts. I always recommend that book to people because it's I mean, we can look at lights in the sky all day long for eternity, but the abduction encounters, I think we're going to start paying attention to that at some point in time because I believe that has a lot of answers to what this UAP or UFO phenomena really is.
yeah. I think throughout the process of disclosure, quote unquote, over the next few years, you're going to hear a lot of other facts come out before anyone dares broach abduction, because it's still
Yeah,
the black sheep within
of
the
course.
taboo. But I think that it's been happening, and I think there's a hybridization program that they're
Yeah.
conducting with our species. But just to finish the thought, when you hear about grays floating and objects sometimes floating in the vicinity of grays, you don't say, well, what's their propulsion system? It's not like that. You don't think, well, there's a technology. You just think that they have a means of not being bound by laws of gravity.
Yeah.
Um, so so I sought to bring my own perspective, my own background in psychic spiritual research, um, and um, and Sasquatch, although I don't mention Sasquatch in the current book. But anyway, I wanted to bring that perspective to bear in this current
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah. Just add that angle of vision.
Do you think that there is, with the extraterrestrial or whatever these beings are, I've always had a personal thought that a deep, very profound intuition in my soul, in my mind, in my consciousness, that their purpose with us. I think there is something about our souls that they're either fascinated by, or they're I'm trying to figure out the best way to even to explain it. I think there's just some type of connection with our souls that they're intrigued or either researching on us. I'm very curious of what that connection is, but it's always been a very profound feeling that there's something about our souls and the afterlife connected to UFOs for sure.
Yeah, I've started to think the same thing because they're obviously fascinated by our bodies too,
Yeah,
or else they wouldn't do all of this invasive procedures on us. They're fascinated by our genetic material. Obviously, they take it against our will. So, but I think also that I think that they don't come from another planet unless there's some larger kinship billions of years ago, and
mhm,
that our species is actually represented on various planets.
yeah,
But I don't think they evolved separately from us on a foreign planet because A, they look so much like us, and B, they apparently have compatible DNA with us. That's not going to crop up independently, on
yeah,
another planet. If they're able to mate with us, as so many testimonials have it, that you
right,
know, or take our genetic material and or like cause a woman to become pregnant
yeah,
and then take the fetus 3 months later, as is attested to back in the day in Bud Hopkins's books, and then currently, there are hundreds of testimonials now, thanks to the internet, that we can
yeah,
just you can just soak in on YouTube. And so I think this is happening. I think they're trying to blend with us,
yeah.
make a new species to replace us. One little girl I read the other day in this really good book called Taken says to the gray who's like snipping her fingernails and her hair and stuff. She says, "Why do you need so many pieces of me?" And the um, the alien says, "We're going to make a new you,"
Wow.
which is kind of a chilling thing.
Yeah, it's super
A
creepy.
little bit of a chilling thing.
Yeah.
Um, and another one in that same vein is this woman said, looked up at the abductor and said, "You're really ugly." And then it said, "This is what you're going to look like."
Oh boy.
So I don't know. But those two don't point exactly in the same direction.
Yeah.
But the idea is that they are trying to merge with us,
Yeah.
or perhaps re-merge if our two evolutionary lines split off, centuries ago or millennia ago, and now perhaps they their line is kind of petering out because their bodies, at least the grays,
Yeah.
are really like unimpressive and apparently not able to reproduce anymore, and they're just kind of
Right.
like these clone drones,
Well,
and
even
they seem to be reaching back to us to gain to collect this primordial DNA that can then upgrade their own species and allow them to kind of have a second crack at evolution.
yeah. Even but there's a clip from Bob Lazar on camera where he talks about, someone asked him, what do you think that they're doing with us? And he said that some of the paperwork that he went through is that he saw that it was noted that the extraterrestrials called us containers,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and he thought that that we were containers for souls. So it's very fascinating. And again, we're linking. I mean, there's your afterlife connection again. But it's very intriguing. But
Well, we could be containers for souls or containers for the material that they need, which is the
true,
genetic material, but it could be both.
yeah,
And I was going to say, I forgot to, thanks for getting me back on track, because your original question was about the soul connection.
yeah,
And I think my hunch is that they don't have the same kind of souls as we do. And there's something about ours that, yes, fascinates them,
yeah.
that
Or
they
maybe
need.
or maybe
Go ahead.
that's helping them link into another realm that we transition into that maybe they can't go into. So maybe we are the key, maybe trying to replicate our soul energy. That may be a key for them to unlock another realm that maybe they're not able to transition into. I mean, that's just a
And that's
theory, but
exactly that's exactly my theory that I put at the end of the book. So you've anticipated that.
oh, well, good.
And so I think it's that we can, and this comes up in Whitley Strieber's book called The Afterlife Revolution, where he talks about the death of his wife
Hmm.
Annie, and how um, Annie now inhabits an environment that has sometimes these visitors. They call them the visitors, and but usually not. And but she never sees the visitors kind of in this high vibrational level. It's always this mid level. And it seems to me, as she says, sometimes they help people to come down and visit Earth.
Yeah,
They'll like help them, as she says, tunnel back down. But a tunnel is just a metaphor. It's just a vibrational,
yeah,
lowering their vibration. Um, and but the idea is that why else, if they could transcend to heaven, however you call that, and I don't mean the Christian sense exactly, but whatever heaven is, um, which is our soul, our consciousness transcending this experience that we've hopefully learned from and grown from, and then we go to this higher register of frequency, but it's still matter and energy, I think. um, and I think if they could do that, they would simply go there. Why
yeah.
else would they be boomeranging back and forth, never staying here long, never staying up there long, but continuing to come back and forth?
Hmm.
It seems like they're sort of um, stuck. And when they take, um, they're caught in between. When they take people, they don't take them to the transcendent fields and light and love of the afterlife that has been described by near-death survivors
Yeah,
and by deceased spirits who talk through mediums who have been vetted and proven themselves to be genuine. They don't take abductees there. They just take them to some sort of austere way station, some like enclosure, which some describe as being like a tank, but in any case, or like a just a very clinical antiseptic surgical space.
right.
It's not transcendent into heaven. I think they can only exist in the middle, and
Yeah,
they're sort of however this came to be. They're kind of condemned or sentenced to shuttle back and forth and try to emulate our ability to transcend farther. And I don't know why
yeah,
this what caused all this, but this seems to be the state of affairs that we're stuck in right now.
yeah. There's a lot of talk, and I mean, this may sound like lunacy to the average person on the street, but there's a lot of talk that today, especially, that extraterrestrials or whatever they are could be connected to the demonic realm. And this isn't just, kook, UFO research people, saying this. I mean, this is coming from people with inside the government. I mean, allegedly, there's been extremely high-ranking people in the Air Force, from what has been allegedly said, is that they claim that it is connected to the demonic realm and that we don't know what we're getting ourselves into. And that's one of the reasons why the disclosure has never happened, because the real revelations of what they could potentially be could be so earth shattering that humanity could never recover from it. I'm not so much 100% on the fence of that. I entertain the idea because it's, anything is obviously possible. But when you have very credible people that are alluding that some of these entities could be connected to the demonic realm, how do you how do you perceive that? And what are your thoughts on, could this be, potential? And what really could be, maybe is the term demonic, or whatever demonic is, maybe that's just something that we don't really fully understand. I know I'm kind of branching off on two different things here, but what do you think of the potential of these extraterrestrials or these entities being connected to the demonic realm?
A couple things. First, I think a lot of people in America in general, and therefore in the military hierarchy, are fundamentalist Christians, and I think
Yeah.
it makes sense for them to read the situation through their prism or their
Mhm.
frame. And if they're, unshakable fundamentalist Christians, and the behavior of these visitors um, kind of fits the bill of a lot of things that you would think that evil things do, then
Yeah.
it's going to be demonic. And therefore, um, they wouldn't want to. Then they wouldn't want to aid in disclosure because, like you say, it would cripple the spirits of the people of the earth to know that in
Yeah.
fact demons are,
Yeah.
are,
They're
are
are
among us,
trying to interact in our
and
world and
take us
control us.
every chance they get, and many of us won't even remember, you know. But secondly, they wouldn't want to give the Satan, the side of Satan, the satisfaction or the boost of broadcasting their activities and their success rate. I would think they would want to keep that on the down low,
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't be in service of the devil or the devil's advocate or whatever, in any way. The second thought is that I think there's an array of conscious agents, and some of them negative and some of them positive. And the negative
Right.
ones
Just like
are,
anything in life.
yeah, exactly. It's a continuum, and I think that there's so much information and reality that can be contained just in vibration and frequency levels. I mean, AI is showing us that you can so far almost create consciousness just out of radio waves inside of hardware,
Yeah.
and so there are frequency levels above that of ordinary matter. For instance, dark matter is a much higher frequency, unfathomably higher frequency and lower density than our world. And so it's possible and I theorize in the book, I hypothesize that the dark matter which is 5 or 6 times more plentiful in terms of mass, not just in terms of particles, but mass,
Hmm.
plentiful than ordinary matter, may be the seat or the vehicle of consciousness. But in any case, there's an array of conscious agents, some of them negative, some of them positive, and the negative ones are bad enough that they're equally bad as demons. So, a rose is a rose is a rose,
Yeah.
if that's the right quote. Um, but there's lots of other reasons that it might not be in our best interest to know the truth. I'm about 50-50 on the idea that the day that we learn the true nature of what's going on, we're going to wish with all our hearts that we could go back to the day before, to the innocence of the day before, because there's all sorts of things that could be worse than not knowing. For example, if they're trying to, if part of what they're doing to us in thousands and thousands every day, perhaps, and most 99% of them are never going to report it if they're even consciously aware of what happened, might be taking our genetic material and trying to find a way to poke and prod and find what's this soul that they have,
Right.
and it may be that the long game that they're playing is that they eventually will be enough hybrids that'll be the new species, and the sort of OG humans will be kind of left by the wayside to perform some sort of function that we can't even imagine. Like perhaps we'll just be, I don't know,
Yeah.
the bodyguards or something. I don't know. There's so many. Um, what's a worst case scenario you can think of?
I mean, honestly, I think it's our only real salvation. I mean, for me, I mean, there's a million different directions it could go, but I think it's humanity's destiny to have disclosure because I can't it's almost like the human mind is de-evolving to a degree. I mean, when you look back at some of our ancestors of how profound their knowledge and their connection to the world, to the universe. I mean, our ancestors were not dummies. They were not dumb people.
They were
And
equally smart as us,
if
if
not smarter,
not
I
smarter, but
think
they just paid attention to different things.
yeah, I think that they're smarter in a sense that they didn't obviously have iPhones, but I think that their connection to themselves, to the spirit realm, to the universe was extremely profound. And it was the true destination of where humanity is supposed to head. But somewhere along the timeline, we went off the reservation. And when you look at today of society, it is, in my humble opinion, I see a world made of pure insanity. And there's very few things that I get optimistic about these days. I mean, I get optimistic about having conversations with people like you, but unfortunately, we're far and few. But I think that disclosure is going to have such a profound impact on humanity that is going to shake us to our core and make us come to our senses. Because the day we have disclosure, humanity's going to get a massive priority check. The Kardashians are not going to be quite as important any longer once we have
Maybe they're the
disclosure.
overlords. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'll take the overlords, I guess, but
Yeah.
I do believe that it is going to shake humanity into the right direction, no matter if it's negative or positive. I think it's going to make people realize what consciousness even is. And I think that is our future, one way or another, good or bad. I think that that's our only real destiny, because I cannot see mankind surviving on the path that we are in right now, because technology is not going to be our salvations. Our true salvation is going to be consciousness, an evolution of consciousness, and a true focus on that. I think consciousness is the true technology of the universe. It's something that it's true magic when you're able to harness psychokinesis and when your telepathic abilities kick in, where you're able to see into other realms, and you're able to communicate through your mind and through your thoughts, and able to tap into that. That to me is way better than any iPhone any day of the week. I think it is a very powerful tool, and I think that's really, like I said, I think it's the true technology of the universe. But with me saying consciousness, a lot of people don't really understand what consciousness is. How For most people, they would probably think consciousness means an awareness, and that would not be wrong. But how would you explain what consciousness really is, and what it could be, and what its potential is?
My current thought, though it's way above any of our pay grades, really. But my current thought is that it's a field, like all the physical fields. And why I think this is because um, the best that physics can say right now is that reality, the building blocks of reality, are not elementary particles, but are these what are called quantum fields, which are these fields of potential that particles arise out of when there's enough energy to create them. And these fields are not, it's not action at a distance. It's actually local change, local change, local change. Everything is local. So that's why, I know this is a terrible description, but that's why quantum entanglement is possible. Because if you have, say, you start two photons together and then you separate them by no matter how far, 100 light years, the field in between is so unified that um, these two particles or pieces of energy are still two sides of the same object, two aspects of the same object. So that if you alter one, you are simultaneously altering the other, even though
Right.
they're so far apart. And this has been, one of the main mysteries of discovered in the last 100 years is how is this possible? But it shows that the nature that we see of space and time, incidentally, is an illusion. Distance is an illusion.
Yeah.
It's all local. It's all together. It's all unified, one undivided whole. That so that it's it's not the case that we're a billion miles away from Pluto in one sense, but Pluto is right here in another sense, and it's really hard to get your mind around that.
Yeah.
But why I think consciousness must also be a field is that a remote viewer can be sitting in a room in Florida, a very nice room, by the way, and can suddenly see a room in China and can read books on the shelf, except they be in Chinese. So put that aside. Uh, I didn't pick the right. Uh,
That's
and
okay. You can still see them. That's all that
you
matters.
see them, and you could describe, you could draw. Okay, you could draw what the letters are, and then if you know what I'm saying. Remote viewing is a
Yeah.
real thing. People can do it. How the hell is that possible? Well, it's
Right.
because distance is an illusion, and consciousness can bridge that illusion, can dissolve that illusion or whatever, that mirage of distance. And so I think that consciousness is a field just as much as physical fields. I don't think that consciousness is at the base of all reality like some people do. And I don't think that it's just one small thing among many things. I think it plays a leading role in reality.
Yeah.
The field of consciousness can affect the physical fields. And then we have psychokinesis. Some people, not as many as could do it thousands of years ago. I agree with you, but some people are around who can cause tables to rise, and can cause um, other objects to move around on the desk. If anybody's interested, I have a video in which there are some clips of levitation, object levitation, under strict. One's out on the front porch underneath the sky, so there's no trickery of like wires or whatever, and it's in broad daylight, and these 4 or 5 people are around it, and their hands are on top of the table, and it's at the same house that I went to the seances in. It's on the porch of that house, and the guy I worked with has a long history and never been found to be hoaxing or anything. And these people have their hands on top of the table, and they're in dialogue with a spirit. And finally, the table rises up underneath their hands. And I have clips of that, and a guy in Argentina who can make a table move up, tilt up with his hands on the top, under highly scrutinized conditions in a like a laboratory setting. And that's on the video called "Anti-Gravity Without Technology." So I think you can search it under that. If not, it's on my channel. My channel is called Impossible Visits. So you can see that. And I mean, Leslie Kean, we were mentioning her before, but you may know her if you out there, if you're either a UAP, UFO research follower, you know her from her groundbreaking
Yeah.
New York
New
Times
York.
article in 2017 with Norman Ralph Blumenthal.
Yes, Ralph. Sorry, I
Ralph
forgot it too.
I
I'm
know.
terrible. I'm terrible with
And
names though. So
in 2010, way before that, she had written this very important book called UFOs, and generals and military people come off the record, and she's a scrupulous, very well-respected investigative journalist who's, very careful and very conservative. That is, and you would know her too from her book "Surviving Death,"
yeah.
where she uses her same extremely careful, logical, step-by-step way of thinking to explore the most persuasive arguments for survival. It's called survival of bodily death. So you know that she's highly trustworthy, and she goes to she's a member of the circle the seance circle of this,
Mhm.
this man, Stuart Alexander in England, that we were mentioning before. And she has a quote that I'd like to read if I can quickly. Oh, here it is. When you can sit in a room and watch objects levitate before your eyes, which I've done many times, and so have many others, there's got to be a physics, a scientific explanation for what is going on to make that happen. And I wish that more scientists were curious about this.
Yeah.
This is actually happening, she says. Um, and so this is what's happening with UAPs too. Things are being caused by consciousness to occur that could not occur under ordinary laws of physics. And I think that many or most researchers are barking up the wrong tree and trying to figure out what the technology is behind it. They're barking up the tree of materialism.
Yeah.
And I have this notion of materialism with a small m, which is
Yeah.
ordinary matter, and then there's materialism with a capital M, which is all the matter and energy, much of which we can't yet detect, except we can detect dark matter through its gravitational effect, but we don't know anything about it, specifically. And I think that dark matter, the scientists say that dark matter suffuses our solar system, not just galaxies and the universe, but it suffuses everywhere. So there's at least as much dark matter in this room as there is ordinary matter. I think that that could be, you know, how I said that these quantum fields are fields of pure potential that then give rise to particles. Like there's a separate field for every kind of particle. There's an electron field of potential, and then there's proton field of potential and quark fields of potential. I think that consciousness is a field of potential, and that it can give rise to matter and energy. And then that is what can cause objects to levitate. And and um, oh, I forgot what I was going to say. And I just think this is what we mean by dark matter, because that's just a label. It just means matter and energy that we know is there, but we can't. I don't think we're ever going to find particles of it, because I think it's not the same kind of matter, but it has to be something, because psychic phenomena aren't caused by nothingness. It's got to
Mhm.
be something. It's got to be energy and matter enough to be compatible with our ordinary energy and matter, or else we wouldn't be able to cause things to occur, and we wouldn't be able to span distances,
Yeah.
and look into the room in China. It's got to be able to operate within this small frame situation, even though it exists, cosmically.
Yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of people have psychic abilities, whether they realize it or not. And I do little examples like, when you're thinking about someone, and then all of a sudden that person calls you, or vice versa. You call someone and go, "Oh my God, I was just getting ready to pick up the phone and call you." I mean, you could call that a coincidence, but when it happens regularly, like for example, me and my wife, like sometimes I can be thinking about, "Oh, I really want pizza tonight." And then I'll say something about, "Hey, we should go get pizza." And she'd be like, "Oh my God, I've been thinking about that all day." Like it happens so often that
Yeah,
it's not
if
even
it's
coincidence.
regular, it makes sense. I
Yeah.
sometimes shy away from that, because people don't keep records on the background of it all.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do you think about that and they don't call, or you don't get, they're not thinking
Yeah.
about the same thing, and you'd have to ideally have all the data. But if it happens regularly, that becomes more,
Yeah. I
it's
think
your
if you're having like a profound connection with somebody closely, because I've had things that have been so strange that there's just no way that it's a coincidence. I think that you're either putting that thought and you're sending that message, and that person is receiving that message, not so much consciously. They're not realizing like, "Hey, I'm receiving a message from Mike," but
it just steers their thinking.
yeah, and it shows up as their own thoughts, and it's like
Right,
you're
right.
sometimes you may be influencing a person's thoughts and you may not realize that, or they may not realize, and there's no way that you could really prove it. But to me, that I've had so many incidents that are so bizarre, and then not to mention the synchronicities. I have synchronicities that happen in my life that are just absolutely bizarre, and I've gotten to the point now that I just kind of laugh about it, because I trust in a lot of the synchronicities that happen to me. I feel like it's some type of divine guidance that, call it God, the universe, or whatever it is, or, consciousness itself. I've had things that show up in my life that are I can be thinking of, or something, a need that I have in my life, and then magically something just appears in my life, and it's so blatantly obvious that this is showing up for a reason, that you can't look at that and go, that was a coincidence. And I have string of synchronicities that consistently happen, and I'm consistently blown away by what by what I experience. And
I don't
it's
want to
really,
put you on the spot, but our audience would probably like to hear an example or two.
I'm trying to think of some stuff. I mean, literally, it's just like everyday type things. I can't think of anything like that's been I should be taking notes on this stuff, to be honest with you, but it's little things. It's like, for example, if I needed, I can't think of a specific thing in general, but I know this is something that's happened in the past, where I was like, man, I could really use some extra cash. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm receiving an email from someone going, hey, would you be interested in filming this project for me? We have something coming up next month. I'm a videographer by trade and journalist. And then all of a sudden, this random email through that may be the only one I got of a year for some side work to do, just shows up. And that's what I'm talking about, is synchronicities. Or, if, oh God, I can't even really think of anything out the bat. They're just little things, but we just laugh about them these
Yeah,
days
I
because
know.
they happen, and it happens to my partner, and she sees them. And I think that once you become aware that synchronicities are a thing, and when they start showing up in your life, they're blatantly obvious, and you're just like, oh, of course this is happening. I mean, have you ever had any synchronicities happen,
Yeah,
strange
but of
things?
course, when you try to think of them,
I know, yeah, then they don't pop up.
you draw a
But
blank. Yeah,
the
but I'll
the
tell you,
moment
oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, the moment I end this podcast, I'll probably think of a
I,
dozen things.
10 of
But
them. Yeah. I don't even think of it as like sending a message and getting it back anymore. I think they're all right here. I think it's more a case of just attuning to them.
yeah,
You know how like a strong radio signal will be present in every cubic inch for like 1,000 miles.
yeah,
I think everything is right here. It's like a fractal or a holographic. The whole is in every part
yeah,
like that. And I don't think of telepathy or remote viewing as going anywhere. I think of it as it's all here. It's just a matter of, can you tune to it? There's
yeah,
a frequent. There's so many. It's like an infinite number of frequencies, and how much information is. And these frequencies are so much more rich, um, and just energetic than radio waves that we count on for radio and still for computers. That they contain all this information everywhere, and there's a band, there's a frequency for that room in China and the books on the shelf. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's just bizarre to think that way, but that's how I've come to think of it. And so that synchronicities. If we didn't know the synchronicities existed, if we were just kind of coming into this world like an alien, say, from somewhere, another dimension, and we realized how this physics and the physics of consciousness work, we would predict synchronicities.
yeah,
We would predict telekinesis, and then we find out, oh yeah, that happens. Well, of course it happens because
yeah,
this is how reality is. And I know I'm kind of butchering and shorthanding a lot of this stuff, but if anyone's remotely interested in my viewpoint, to the extent I've been able to articulate it here late at night. It's all in my book, UAPs and the Afterlife, and
yeah,
so you can take a look. It's only there's the Kindle version is cheap, and it's better because it's got really good images, color, very clear images. Whereas the paperback, the images don't look so good. So I would recommend the Kindle version.
yeah. I would like to. I know we're getting close to wrapping up, but I would like to share one thing that's been recently happening in my life that I believe is connected to consciousness in
Oh, good.
UAPs. So, I've been very intrigued with Chris Bledsoe, and I know that he has these objects that show up. I mean, he's posting images of these amazing orbs that showed up, and I've been reading other things that people have had experiences, like basically using your consciousness to try to make these things manifest. Well, there's been a
Also known as CE5, right?
yes, and this is, I've had some experiences my own that have been extremely intriguing, where I have had strange feelings to go outside at night in my backyard, and I'll get this intuition to look up in a certain part of the sky, and I started seeing these things that would flash, crystal clear nights. I would see something that would just go blink, almost like a camera flash, and I would
Mm.
look up and I would see it. And me being me, I would be like, maybe I didn't really see that. But then it started happening so frequently where I would look up and get this intuition and see these flashes going off that I started thinking maybe I really am seeing this. You know, I just kept thinking, Is this my eyes playing tricks on me? Am I just seeing something that I thought I saw and I really didn't see?" But it started happening quite often. And then I started watching some other podcasts with some other people who talk about synchronicities. This would be a perfect example. Here I am having this experience. I'm trying to convince myself that I'm seeing what I'm actually seeing. I mean, I'm physically seeing it, but your brain doesn't even want to. Your brain goes into protection mode and makes you think, well, maybe I didn't see that.
You
Maybe it's
second
just
guess yourself instantly.
exactly.
It's
And
like
I do that.
With Sasquatch research too. You're
I
always
do it.
second guessing. Was that
Yeah.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been second guessing myself, even though I'm clearly seeing something, but it's so fleeting. And then here I am, and like I said, this is a perfect segue into synchronicities. So these things are recently happening. Then I'm listening to this one particular podcast while I'm driving down the road, and this guy who is podcast host is literally giving a play by play of exactly what I'm experiencing. Where he would see these flashing things, and they call them, I think they just call them the flashers. And so my jaw hit the floor while I'm driving, and I'm like, I can't believe that someone is literally giving an exact play-by-play of what I experienced and how I experienced. He literally talked about intuition, looking up, having a feeling to look into a certain particular spot of the
Yeah.
sky, and he
That's a
even
great
described.
example. Yeah,
And
that's wonderful.
yeah, and this is, I mean, that happened almost like a couple of days after I experienced what I experienced. And to me, that was a very profound synchronicity that said, hey, you're not alone. And that
Right.
actually happened. That's how I processed that synchronicity. And I remember calling my wife and going, like, you're not going to believe this. Like, I kept telling you about these flashing things that I keep seeing in the sky. Well, here's another guy who's literally having the same experience that I'm having. And then the synchronicity continued. I'm hearing other people who are talking about the same exact phenomena that I'm having. So for me, it solidified my experience. I don't really understand exactly what's going on, but it almost seems like it's saying, "Hey, we hear you. You're using your intuition, you're using your consciousness, and this is how this works."
Because
So
we're all in the same. We're all in the same boat. I mean, we're all in the
yeah,
same place. That they're ready to manifest right above my house right now. I just don't know how to attune to them. But
exactly.
you're
And I
learning how. You're learning how to. Do you know this podcast called Project Unity?
that's the pro that's
Ah,
the
I thought so,
that
Jay.
was
Okay,
Project
Jay Anderson.
Unity.
I heard his
Yes.
story about the orbs over his house. They came down right freaking 4 feet above his roof.
Now mine didn't do that. I keep
Yeah.
praying for
So you
that, but
remember he talked about that?
yeah, but he
Yeah.
talked originally, he talked about the flashers, and then it got more profound where they were
Right.
literally coming
Well,
down for
you
his
seem to
house.
be on that same trajectory.
Yeah, and like I said, when I heard that, it was validation of
I'll
of my
bet. Big
experience,
time. Huge,
and
huge validation.
and then I wanted to I was praying that someone else would see this with me, and then one time we were sitting in the backyard, my wife was there, and then I look up because normally when they flash, it's like one time, and then that's it. It's not
It's
like
like
they're just
just because it's sort of like just for you.
yeah, it's like, "Hello," and then it's
Yeah,
gone,
yeah,
just
right,
like that. So there's
right,
no, like, physical orb where it's, like, traveling across the sky like a
right.
satellite. It's just a, "Hey," and then it's gone. And I've seen them several times where it would happen maybe twice or 3 times in a night. It doesn't happen every night, every single night. Matter of fact, it hasn't happened in about a month, and I've actually been like, "Why aren't you doing this anymore?" Like, kinda
Yeah,
getting upset about it.
yeah.
But, I was sitting in the backyard one time and I really just wanted someone else to see what I was seeing. And they only flash one time at any given time. So one time I get my intuition, the feeling came around. I look up and it's a crystal clear night and I see it flash. And I go, "Oh my God, there it is," because my wife's sitting there with me, and it flashed 3 times
For
in
her.
in consecutive flashes,
Did she
3
freak
times.
out?
She was just like, "Huh, that was
Is
weird."
she
Because
is she not as excited about this stuff as you are?
no, she's super I mean, she's into this stuff too, but it's just how her mind works. She's like, "Huh." I
She's
mean,
gonna
she saw
process.
it.
I'll mull that over. Yeah.
She saw it, and she
Yeah.
was just like, "I don't know what that was," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Well, I can't tell you what it was, but you saw it too."
At least
So,
now
yeah.
we're on the same page with seeing this.
Yeah, and it really kinda goes to show that, consciousness, I do believe, is the key, and I think that's going to be how some type of initial disclosure well, I mean, government could do disclosure, but I think the real contact between humanity and whatever it is that we're dealing with is is going to be on a level through higher states of consciousness. And that's my opinion of how it's going to happen. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and maybe they show up and
I mean,
there's a whole
the sort of current pioneer of CE5, which stands for Close Encounters
yeah.
of the Fifth Kind, which is what Mike is talking about, is this guy named Stephen Greer, and he's a
Hmm.
very controversial figure because he believes apparently he's had lots and lots of success with
Yeah.
taking groups out and they
Yeah.
meditate together and they get these manifestations and it's all wonderful. And but he believes that all the visitors are beneficent and they want to raise our consciousness and help us to evolve. And he thinks that all abductions are perpetrated by the government to make us
Yeah.
afraid of the
I don't buy that, but
aliens. And I
yeah.
don't think that can be true. And he said some other
No.
squirrely things that I don't think are true. But
Yeah.
you know, I
I
mean,
think
he's done a lot of good. So
yeah, I think Greer has done a lot of initial legwork for the disclosure movement, but I
that's a good way
feel
to put
like
it. That's a good way to put it.
yeah, I mean, he's the one who got the train moving, so to speak, but I think he's kind of I think his ego has gotten in the way because
Hmm.
he likes to according to Greer, everybody's wrong except him. And I don't
Yeah,
believe that,
I don't like that. No,
I
I
don't think
don't.
he's a charlatan, so to speak. I just think that his ego's gotten in the way. And I think he's kind of gone awry because everybody else except Greer is either a disinformation agent or they're a useful idiot, as he's called them, and he loves to shit talk on people and call people names and say this person is an agent, a disinformation agent, when clearly they're doing great work for the disclosure movement.
Right.
It's kind of sad, but yeah, I'm like you.
I
I
think
think he,
maybe it's that he was kind of prominent, more prominent before, and
sure,
now that the sort of spotlight of national consciousness is beginning to focus more and more on this topic, other figures are emerging, and he's kind of less prominent, and maybe he feels that he wants to
yeah,
regain the spotlight.
yeah.
I don't. That's just like armchair psychologizing
I
there.
know.
I
It's like, come on,
apologize.
let's not trash everybody in the UFO field. Let's all play nice because, you know, they're all doing work and, we don't have to agree on, what it is people say and believe, but, every person who's bringing something to the disclosure movement is a great tool and a great asset and I think it's a shame. But I want to be conscientious of your time, my friend, and I just want to thank you again for coming on here. It's been a fantastic conversation. I would love to have you back on again in the near future to do more deep dive into the Bigfoot phenomena, because that's, like I said, that's a rabbit hole all on its own. And I've had some other encounters that correlate with Bigfoot high strangeness that we can talk about sometime. But yeah, but like I said, fantastic
Well,
conversation. I
I
really,
mean, Sasquatch, just here a little nutshell here. Sasquatch alter electronic equipment.
yeah.
Sometimes around them things appear, like marbles and things.
Hmm.
Mike Patterson, in my last book, There Is No Veil, I have a whole chapter on the Sasquatch and how the phenomena that occur, not just to Mike Patterson, but him most prominently, are analogous or like mirror images of what occur in seances. Also,
Yep.
like the appearance of marbles. In my case, it was a little stone, but he it's not just his claims. There was this filmmaker, Christopher Monk or Munch. I don't know how to say it, but it's spelled Munch. He's the one who made Letters from the Big Man,
Oh yeah, that was a great film.
perhaps the only serious Sasquatch movie ever made. And in fact, I think it is.
Yeah,
That's not a documentary. I mean, and when Christopher Monk was talking on camera out in the woods, a marble fell right in front of him.
yeah,
He picked it up, and there it was. So, and not only that, so they 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 um, they can facilitate these manifestations. Mike has on camera him and his friend walking around in the
yeah,
snow, and then all of a sudden there's a footprint behind them that wasn't there a second ago.
yeah.
And so I don't think that Sasquatch is a separate issue at all.
Yeah, I think everything is. I think we like to package things up and put them
Yeah,
in their own corner, but I
right.
think at the end of the day, I don't know if we'll ever figure out everything, but I believe that everything is connected to everything. It's just a big circle.
Yeah, or not even that. It might just be a point,
Yeah,
and every point contains the entire thing.
yeah. Amen to
Um,
that.
well, I've appreciated this a lot. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for having me on.
absolutely. And again, if real quick, if people wanted to find your books, learn more about you, where should they go?
Well, I have a web page. It's not really an interactive site. It's a page with all my stuff on it, and it's called thenearnessofyou.net.
Perfect.
And you can contact me through that page. I mean, it's just an email address. If you want to talk or tell me of any of your experiences, I'd love to be in touch with people. I love it when people reach out of the blue, and suddenly I have a new friend, a new contact, a new
Yeah.
contributor to this whole conversation that we're all having.
Yep.
So definitely do that.
All right. Well, all right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. We appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you here next time.
Good night.